So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk a little bit about democracy, and that's roughly what it would look like. A lot of shouting children with mouths open, hoping that at the end of the protest there'll be hummus. Democracy may be the enemy of progress where climate change is concerned for the time being, but we'll try and figure that out. Can anybody here tell me, because you're probably relatively intelligent, I mean, I've seen a lot of you, instead of laughing, doing some very good nods. It tells the person next to you that you didn't really find it funny, but you knew the fact and you understood the data. Okay, by show of hands, ladies and gentlemen, who here believes that climate change is an issue that needs addressing? Raise your hand nice and high if you think that climate change is an issue that needs addressing. That's almost everybody. That's tremendous. Raise your hand, please, if you believe that at least in part the responsibility for that sits with the government. At least in part. So raise your hand if you think the government have some responsibility. That is everybody as well. Raise your hand if you think that businesses, shops and traders have some part to play in dealing with issues surrounding climate change. That, again, is everybody. And raise your hand, please, if you believe that we have a personal responsibility to deal with climate change, at least in part where this is concerned. That is 100% consensus. So there you are, that solved it. Well, democracy is not an issue then, is it? But I did that deliberately because, you see, this is the point. It's all very well sitting here nodding and going, yes, but how do we communicate this beyond here? It's very difficult. I think this is an enormously problematic issue, you know, because we're all, those of you who voted that you agreed with those things, how many of you are convinced, really convinced that you are right? And I don't mind leading the charge on this. I think that I'm right on this. Really convinced. Really, quite a few of you are like, yeah, I am, but I'm too embarrassed to say. Still, that's more than half of us. So, and how far are you willing to go, given that you're certain that you're right, to change people's minds? I'll fight a person. See, it's difficult. It's very difficult for a government to convince people to vote for them when part of their agenda is fixing climate change, because despite what the views may be of some of the people in this room, the solutions are not very appealing to most of us. Insulate properly, spend money insulating your house properly, and you may make, over the next 10 to 20 years, an 11% saving on your... Oh, fuck me, that's sexy. Oh, Christ, I'm actually turned on. Oh, what a solution that is. Go to fewer places, drive less, and shop more sustainably and eat less meat. Oh, I think I just... Did you? Because it is. It's exciting, sexy stuff, isn't it? Just makes me so fizzy. It's difficult. I don't know how people convince. So maybe we do what China does. You know, maybe we install a dictatorship. I'm not saying that I would be the right sort of person to be a dictator, but I did go to a boarding school. So, in democracy then, who do we vote for? Well, you could vote Green, I suppose. You could listen to Russell Brand and do everything apart from not vote. He's the best mouthpiece for the Green Party without realising that he's speaking. Everything he says is pro-Green Party, apart from the fancy stuff about what he wears and people he's had sex with. You could vote for UKIP, I suppose. You could. I wouldn't, though, if I was you. Winston Churchill said the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. But that's, and I agree in essence, but that's the problem, isn't it? The elitist slow nods that happen in rooms like this where people all gather somewhere nice, where clever people come together and go, We are very off-putting. I mean, I'm not, I'm on the telly, but... We're fantastically off-putting. People, people find idiots much more appealing than us, you see? But they do, so I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you make it sexy. I mean, the breasts on page 3 have gone from the Sun today. Maybe we replace them with some sustainability solutions. Good fun. So I don't have a conclusion. I don't have a solution to the issues that are thrown up by existing within a democracy where, you know, fundamentally everybody's opinion on polling day is of equal value. The rest of the time it definitely isn't, by the way, the BBC. But, you know, I don't know how you address it. I don't know how you try and sell these things to people, and it would be even more arrogant than I usually am to suggest that I do know the answer to that. I do know that governments have all governments, dictatorships and democratically elected ones, have a very difficult time of it because nobody wants to step first. And I wrote a piece about the Copenhagen climate talks some time ago, which achieved practically nothing, because I just watched over the days, I watched it go round and round, and nobody sort of seemed to be willing to go first and really do anything gutsy. And then there was a big fight in the middle of it where some greenies got overexcited and got beaten to crap by the police. So it reminded me of a Dr. Seuss poem, and I'm a big fan of Dr. Seuss, so I wrote this about the Copenhagen climate talks, which was some time ago, but fortunately for my material, nothing's changed. It's not great where the planet's concerned, but there we are. The delegates came and the delegates sat, and they talked till their bums all went flat. Then the delegate said of the country he knew, "We must do something quick, but just what should we do?" So they sat again thinking, and there they stayed seated, sitting and thinking. The planet's been heated. "I think," said a delegate there from Peru, "that we all must agree on some things we could do, like reducing emissions, at least CO2. I will be doing accents, by the way. So they nodded and noted, then vetoed and voted. Then one of them stood up and suddenly quoted, "It's the science, you see, that's the thing that must guide us. When the leaders all get here, they're certain to chide us." So they sat again thinking about what to think, then decided to ponder what colour of ink to use on the paper that they'd all agreed to be selfless, not greedy, McGreedy. "But how do we choose just what colour to use?" said a delegate there who'd been having a snooze. "We need clear binding targets, definitive action. We all must agree clearly, without more distraction." So they sat again thinking of targets for ink, but the ink in their thinking had started to stink, and they started to think that the ink was a kink in their thinking about the real things they should think. "If the climate needs mending, then this is our chance," said the nuclear delegate sent there by France. "We need to agree on one thing to agree on, something we all want a fixed guarantee on." "Yes," said another, who thought this made sense, "some value for carbon in dollars or pence." But the mention of money and thoughts of expense had stifled the progress, and things became tense. Then the fella from China, with a smile on his face, I won't do the accent, said, "Who put the carbon there in the first place?" "Wasn't us," said the US. "Then Europe did too." "Well, I don't think we did it," said the small Tuvalu. Then a silence descended, and no words were spoken, till a delegate stood up, voice nervous and broken. "Is there nothing upon which we can decide? Because on Wednesday my chicken laid eggs that were fried." "We all like a sing-song," said the bloke from down under. But then the great hall was all shouting and thunder. Policemen had entered and were wearing protesters who they'd beaten and flattened like bloodied sou'westers. The police had decided to downplay this crime with prevention, detention and beatings in rhyme. The greenies who'd shouted and asked for decision were now being battered with lethal precision. All sick of inaction and fed up of waiting, all tired of the endless debate placating, they'd risen up, grating, berating and hating, so the police had commenced the related debating. Ban Ki-moon put his head in another man's lap and was last heard muttering something like crap. But the chap next to him said it's more like it's poo, so the Great Hall debated not what they should do, but how to decide between crap, cack and poo. "It is poo, it is cack, it is crap, we agree," which was written and labelled as document 3. "I think if we all find one thing we can agree on, then maybe Brazil might be left with a tree on." So they sat again thinking of trees in Brazil and of glaciers which had retreated uphill, and they thought of the poor folks whose homes were in flood, but less of the protesters covered in blood. They pondered the species so nearly extinct, it's as if they all thought that these things may be linked. "We need a solution, we need action, please," said a lady who'd come from the sinking Maldives. The others all nodded and said it was fact, that the time must be now, not to talk, but to act. Then a barber arrived and said, most rhetorical, "Action is action, and not metaphorical." "Wow," they all thought, "he must mean allegorical." I love it when Barrett goes all oratorical. "But the problem I have is that Congress won't pass it." "Bugger," said Banky, then sorry, then arse it. Then Brown said, "I've got it. Now how does this strike you? It's simpler when voters already dislike you." He suggested the EU should lead from the front, so the Mail and the Telegraph called him something very unpleasant indeed. So the delegates stared at the text with red marks on, ignoring the gales of laughter from Clarkson. No one was satisfied, nobody won, except the morons convinced it was only the sun. And they blew it and wasted the greatest of chances. Instead, they all frolicked in diplomat dances and decided decisively right there and then that the best way to solve it was to meet up again and decide on a future that's greener and greater, not with action right now, but with something else later. Thank you very much.